Hello, everyone. This is Julieta from Your World. We are here on our last live session of the Pop TV series. So today we will talk about challenge of education for peace. Uh, Along all the season, we have given these sessions, we have seen that education for peace is comprehensive of an extensive array of topics to be considered. We have learned a lot about different experiences, different topics from education for all, informal education, how to deliver quality content education related to the culture of peace. So to finish this season, I believe this is a great opportunity to explore what are some of the challenges that education for peace is facing and what we need to improve the culture of peace in societies. So the way that education has evolved and educational community has acknowledged some of the issues to be considered, I believe are the platform we need to keep while moving forward on our peace building efforts. International community is learning progressively how to deal with issues such as discrimination, violent conflicts, gender issues, and much more in education. Now we know that education is more than students and teachers in a classroom and goes beyond to be educated through our daily lives during all our life. So before moving, we keep remind you that there is a chatbot area in the right side of the screen. So anytime you feel like share an opinion, express an idea, or ask some question, please feel free to do that. Okay. So I would like to start sharing a couple of ideas, like a roadmap. I think can be useful to continue the discussion while international community is deepening the work on education and peace. I want to start with something that can be called like the ripple effect. The ripple effect related to education and the culture of peace. Why I named the ripple effect like something that can be challenging for peaceful education. And that is because the UN called it for the promotion of a culture of peace by educating people to see themselves as a peaceful people with norms that emphasize cooperation and the resolution of conflicts by dialogue, negotiations. The culture of peace itself means that we can adopt in our daily lives a lot of concepts that can be translated into actions, into peaceful actions in our lives and in our communities. Once we start to do that, we have some challenges to go further, to move forward. Nowadays, it's a challenge to strengthen the educational spaces to affect not only individuals or students in this case, but the society as a whole. And that is when the ripple effect come in as a way to go. As far as education and peace building strategies can be replicated and extend their influence out of schools' walls, then the culture of peace will continue to be spread. It is a constant challenge that education for peace ensures that peace education's effect spread into wider cycles in the society or in societies. Um, in the past sessions, we have seen different situations where the education for peace it's really adopted in schools, in the curriculum of schools, and the teachers, the educators, try to bring this culture of peace, principles, and values into their classrooms. But again, we need to make this something wider. That's why I believe the ripple effect is very important. When citizens of the world understand global problems, have the skills to resolve conflicts, and struggle for justice non-violently, live by international standards of human rights and equity, appreciate cultural diversity, and respect the earth and each other, then a culture of peace can become a sustainable reality. Societies need to express its desire to live in peace, affecting the hearts and minds of individuals to become more peace oriented or more tolerant in a given social context. This is why I believe it's very, very interesting to share this challenge because we have a common shared values internationally about what the culture of peace means and what the culture of peace is. So now it needs to be to have more power into our daily lives with kids or with people while it's being educated and continue to the rest of the life of a society. And it needs to be enforced in different contexts and situations. So let's think about that. The ripple effect as part of our great goal that is to really live in societies that have adopted for full the principles and values of the culture of peace. Sorry. So, from this ripple effect, we have we have commented. I have said a lot in the past minutes references to peace education and peace values, which are like the pillars. So the challenge of standards commonly accepted and the standards under conflictive situations are related to what we intend for peace education and how we relate that education with the peace values. Peace education considers the necessity to define peace values and respecting the dignity of human being, which is a fundamental value on which many others are built. The essential importance of peace education implies, for example, that vulnerable groups must learn to appreciate peace as one of the fundamental values in their own lives. And I will make a little stop here because it's really important. I would like to stress that if we can have this very vivid notion of human dignity while we are educating, that the dignity of a human being is essential, then I think everything can only move forward towards a more peaceful society, a more peaceful community, and toward this culture of peace that we want to treasure for everyone. So it's something that I believe it's really, really the essence of this whole culture of peace notion and values. So let's back. The meaning of peace education, however, can be different in relation to different cultural groups, complexity of local situations, and social or political context of certain involved population, just to mention a few. Let's explore some different ideas about what is needed to make peace education a reality, become a reality. For in some areas, the people said that peace education needs a necessary change of people's mentality. This notion, this concept, is the very basic concept made by UNESCO. UNESCO made a reference, and a specific reference of peace education by saying building peace in the minds of men and women. This change of mentality, as quoted by UNESCO, should lead to understand and act for the respect and well-being of people and in the spirits of tolerance. So, by one side, peace education begins in the minds of people. That goes according to UNESCO references, and for this becoming true, we need that people get to understand, respect the others, and do it in the spirit of tolerance. So tolerance here plays a major role. Let's move forward a little bit to deepen about what tolerance implies. Tolerance implies willingness to tolerate a position, idea, or behavior, which are expressed by certain person but consider it wrong by the other. We could say, or we could think, that that is something that happens all the time in life, in our daily lives. But something that maybe for some people can be a normal situation. We are expressing our ideas, sometimes in contrary sense, all the time. But in certain conditions, that is essential to start building peace, to start educating for peace. If the practice of tolerance is strengthened as a result, people will acknowledge the existence of differences and will be more respectful of the freedom of expression inherent to each individual. Each individual will then feel respected and willing to express their ideas and beliefs without feeling threatened. As a result, communities will become more peacefully, having tolerance behavior, which is the essence of a culture of peace. Tolerance, the right of express ourselves, freedom of expression, is something that needs to be strengthened for real. We can relate to some famous situations that have happened not long time ago. Actually, we look at in the time, it was like yesterday. For example, in the case of Malala Yousaf, um, specifically, she was attacked. She was under attack because she was expressing herself. She was expressing her beliefs. She was requesting and fighting for her rights and for the rights of people to be educated. And as soon as she started to do that. She was under. Uh, she was threatened. She was really, really a victim of violent groups. But the point here is she didn't stop to express herself. She actually enforced herself and empowered to the others to continue expressing. So we have here a very popular example of what why tolerance is very important if we speak about peace education. This is a very popular example, but I think it's very figurative and it's clear to see why it's essential to start educating people, having tolerance as as a guide, as a way to go. So this is one of the interpretations of what is essential to have a culture of peace and an education for peace. Another interpretation consider um, other interpretation consider that peace education needs a progressive development of specific competencies. For example, in this case, we can consider to create a predisposition to nonviolent conflict management and resolution in context of violent situations. We can consider the need of interacting with others, evaluating and acting by behaviors that tends to accessibility, dialogue, and encounter. So problems, when arise, can be solved without violence. In context of strong social inequality, this education does not pertain to the need exclusively of dialogue, but to educate, to identify also the acknowledgement and warranty of rights. So we have, in a very conflictive areas, not only the dialogue as a base, but also we have to educate so people is able to identify, acknowledge, and ask that their rights are guaranteed. And how we do that? Through education. It's strictly linked with the development of the education, of the curriculum, and the social opportunities that people identify in their societies. So, there is also some areas in the world that are living under very different economic conditions, and that is other challenge we have to overcome. Even in present, we have populations that have part of their population living in very good economic conditions, and others are living under certain standards of economic well-being. So the focus on a peaceful education can be different for these two groups. We have the essentials like tolerance, like dialogue, but we also have, for example, in people with no difficulties at their economies, that probably needs to link this peace education to other social issues. Maybe they are concerned about how to strengthen democracy, how improve the use of resources, human resources, or the use of technologies to improve and enforce a more peaceful community. In other groups can be related to environmental and ecological issues, and to debate about, for example, sustainable development and commitment to disarmament. So, as long as we move into different groups and different situations, education for peace needs the essential pillars to be there, but also focus on what that group needs. It's not something that we really we have really to make this kind of tailor-made curriculum for education over the general or over the essentials. We really need to challenge ourselves to make this tailor-made curriculum for groups, for communities, and for people that is living under very different situations and backgrounds. So, in societies where economic well-being prevails, for example, the topic of peace education is directly connected to the need of peaceful coexistence between different cultures, ethnicities, and religions to activate, especially through dialogue and reciprocal understanding. This entails as well the attention towards the topics such as racism and other forms of discrimination. In particular, it can be considered that in order for this culture of peace to take form and become true in different contexts, is need to guarantee different levels of approach, of supportive action, and in the implementation and in the sustainability of the development of the culture of peace itself. What I said before, we cannot replicate exactly the same curriculum on peace education in Buenos Aires than in, I don't know, a, a village in South Africa or a school in France or a school or students from Syria or from Israel, because their culture, their background, their economic situation, and their social context is totally different. So, this is really a challenge. We really need to create this ripple effect, but in a tailor made way, so we really can strengthen and impact people in their daily lives, and the culture of peace can finally become a reality. All efforts to establish and maintain peace, are depending on people's acknowledgement of human dignity, which obliges educators to awaken respect for each individual, regardless age, gender, ethnicity, nationality, social status, educational standard, and religion. In the 51st session of the General Assembly of the UN, of the United Nations, the concept of culture of peace was formulated in 1989. In the view of the necessity of building up a new vision of peace through the development of a new culture, specifically oriented to and based upon universal values of respect for life, freedom, justice, and solidarity. As this base was set up, since then, a lot of new scenarios have been developed and taking place into a more complex and dynamic world. What I have been saying before, these tailor-made ideas of educating people, having these universal values as the pillars, but evolving as the different communities and the different regions in the world are evolving themselves. As I said before, this ground base for a culture of peace was established and named in the 51st session of the General Assembly of United Nations. So the source of that document will be posted in our portal, and you can have that document as reference for any time you want. Is actually also the source from the official site, the site from the United Nations. As mentioned, the culture of peace can be supported by a stronger educational commitment that is activated in the first place through the revision of school curriculum. The promotion of values of quality, attitudes, and behaviors appropriate and coherent with the development of the culture of peace actions. This needs to get improved. There is still a lot of areas in the world where education for peace needs to become an essential part of the curriculum, and it's not happening everywhere as should be, would like to be. In some schools, for example, in South America, uh, topics such as resolution of conflicts, nonviolent conflict management, dialogue, and tolerance are topics uh, that are not included in the educational curriculum, except for some situations where the school um, is a religious school, so related to religious uh, or faith, it's attached this kind of values, but not itself as a part of the general education of the human being. So we really need to achieve in the world that education gets a stronger support and commitment. Through revision of school curriculum, we can really see if we are going into the right path, if we are improving, and if we really are delivering the education that is committed with the universal values defined for a culture of peace and for peace building. So, as said, this needs to include specific resolution of conflicts dialogue, the building, consent, and nonviolence in social actions, which is all of this is strictly linked to the promotion of sustainable economic and social development, reducing poverty and social inequality, and fostering the conditions for security warranted both for people's life and the recognition of their different needs. In particular, here the reference is to the necessity of intervening with specific means to work groups with special needs. Only by learning from difference and within difference, it's possible to build the necessary tool for development of dialogue and active participation. So, from we have as to recap, we have started saying I have started saying one of the challenge would be to create a ripple effect. For that, uh, according to different ideas about what culture of peace and peace education is, I have shared with you the idea of uh, educators really need to focus mentality, because once that people becomes aware of a more peacefully way to go and to live, the society itself will enforce more and more the idea of a culture of peace. Other point, which is a challenge in this education for peace, is that it's in some areas is considered that peace education needs to be progressive and dynamic, developing specific competencies, which I believe it's also something to improve and a challenge, specific challenge, because the curriculum worldwide needs to improve when we talk about education for peace. Needs to be tailor-made, means related and have sense uh, according to the different groups and to the different regions or countries. Uh, and lately, it needs a stronger support and stronger educational commitment. Needs to be like, activated, starting through a very conscious revision of the school curriculum, enhancing and promoting the essential and the universal values inherent to the culture of peace. And after that needs to include specific resources and tools to provide to communities and the societies so they can put into action what people have learned. Uh, so, as a last thought, I would like to share how do we move from peace education to culture of peace? This is a question we need to constantly make ourselves. For the promotion of peace, it is necessary that each and every social and cultural commitment nourish peace at every level, this ripple effect. We really have to do that if we really want to see a culture of peace as a reality. And this is becoming an essential issue to be addressed specifically in areas of conflict, war, or contextual violence. These areas usually are experiencing strong gender inequalities where people are forced to live with really low levels of literacy. Conflict areas are more problematic because of the elevated exposure to physical violence, particularly toward the most vulnerable people like girls and women. At the same time, they are the cause of the destruction of school systems and different spaces like shelters or rehab centers. In these settings, peace education includes a consideration of how to educate during crisis. Things that are necessary to consider are how to education despite natural disasters, social and military conflicts. When we talk in general, everything looks fine. But as I said before, we need tailor made actions and we need tailor made education for peace. And I saw, and we can see that in the areas of the world when we have this conflict or war situations, education remains like in the backyard. But we really need to know that education is an essential part of the whole system and the whole uh, um, actions to take to restore peace in those areas and for those groups. If we talk about conflict situations, but it applies also to natural disasters. Education needs to be at the forefront, not at the backyard. Uh, as I said, This is like an essential issue to be addressed specifically because it's where people is more exposed, and that's why they need to know what to do, how to do it, and they need the resources to take uh, action to protect their dignity and their lives. And this happens if education is also on the table, even in times of war, in times of conflicts, or in situations of natural disaster. In this setting, education has not to be suspended. Education in emergency situations, for example, could comprise a set of planning activities linked and integrated that allows and foster the development of structured learning processes oriented towards the construction of better and peaceful living conditions in moments of acute crisis or place of instability. It's also important to acknowledge what the vulnerable groups are in a given crisis context and to make joint efforts to provide those groups with accurate educational dispositives and resources to be able to progressively help them to restore their lives back to acceptable standard of living. We are not saying education in this context needs to be like the usual uh, educational dispositives. Specifically, they need to be focused uh, for those kind of situations. And it needs to assure that people that they can have the resources to establish their regular and normal way of life. It's a long way to go, and we can spend hours into debates about how to improve and move forward. It's our scope of work, one person at a time. So that's why I chose to share this approach with you today. I believe that the world is still under extremely violent and war-likely context. Maybe recovering from decades of conflicts in some areas and as a way of living in other regions of the world. This took me to the reflection that we really need to empower this ripple effect for the culture of peace, preceded by a stronger education for peace, and acknowledging that vulnerable, vulnerable groups and communities in violent contexts are more likely to be the weak knot of the rope. I think we need more bold actions toward the implementation of an education for peace, knowing that education is vital as any other human right to ensure the culture of peace and our peace building efforts worldwide. Our motto is each one, teach one, reach back, and live as you climb. That's your world. And I continue believing this is the way to go and a way to start that is becoming more and more committed, starting just from where you are. If each of us can really embrace each other's dignity and work one step at a time, remembering that each of us have something to teach and something to learn, then I believe the culture of peace can become a closer reality for everyone. Thanks. We are getting to the end of this series, and I really felt lucky and was an honor to share the sessions with you. Remember that we have our Pop TV returning on 2019, next year, and past sessions can be viewed on the Bob portal at www.europop.net, where learning for peace continues and moves on. So, thank you for being a part of this season, and thank for being there. We'll continue on next year with more education, with more learning, and doing our part on the culture of peace and peace building. Thank you very much and have a nice day.